Yeah, that's what she's just.
All right, welcome everybody. All right, welcome everybody. Can you guys hear me out there?
Everybody's mic is working but yours? This one's not.
Well, we'll just roll with it. All right, welcome everybody to the City of Norman Business and Community Affairs Committee on Thursday, May the 4th. We have a few items on our agenda tonight, and so we're just going to go ahead and kick it off with a presentation by the University of Oklahoma Capstone Wetlands Pilot Project. So I welcome you guys up to the podium.
Thank you so much for allowing our students to be here this afternoon to share their work with you. My name is Bob Nairn. I'm a professor in the School of Civil Engineering and Environmental Science at OU. And along with my co-instructors, Bob Knox and our graduate teaching assistant, James Queen, who are both here, we facilitated our environmental science and our environmental engineering capstone this semester. We teach this course as a team-oriented, real-world, community-engaged service learning effort. The students will talk to you a bit about some of those experiences that they've had over the last year. They began working in the fall of 2022 and are now ready to present to you their final results on a topic I think that'll be of interest to the city of Norman. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Liz.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Watts, and we are the Environmental Science and Engineering Capstone class of 2023. Our project was to design a pilot-scale treatment wetland for polishing reclaimed municipal wastewater for indirect potable reuse. Oh, shoot. Okay.
The mouse is really touchy.
Okay.
You're not the only
I'm
one.
like-
Everyone that comes up there.
Are you sure? I'm going forwards.
I
It's
think the buttons are reversed as
Reverse
well.
from what you think.
We make it as difficult as possible.
Okay. I'm sorry, thank you. Okay, to go into a little bit more detail about our project, our treatment wetland was for the reuse of the Norman Water Reclamation Facility effluent. This reuse could help augment the water supply into Lake Thunderbird to safeguard against future drought and for when Norman's population expands in the future. One thing all of our teams focused on was the removal and reduction of contaminants of emerging concern. Here on the left is a picture of the Norman Water Reclamation Facility, and on the right is an example of a tertiary treatment wetland for the city of Columbia, Missouri. Here's an overview of what we did during our fall semester. To start out, we built resumes that we used for our career fair, and then our professors then used to assign us into 3 teams: Puddle Bear Wetland Solutions, Octo Engineering, and Narnia Engineering. Once in these teams, we organized ourselves and gave each other roles, and then we developed a schedule for the upcoming year based on when our project documents were due and any sampling dates and site visits. We took our first site visit in the fall to just check out the site and see where it was and what it looked like. And then to finish out the fall semester, we wrote preliminary project documents that had to be done before any more work or sampling on our project could be done. These include the sampling and analysis plan, the health and safety plan, the project work plan, and the quality assurance project plan. We also started literature review during this time. Here's an overview of what we did during the first half of our spring semester. To start out, we revised our project documents that we wrote in the fall, and then we organized all of our literature review over topics such as CECs, indirect potable reuse, vegetation and treatment wetlands into topical reports. We then took our first field visit for testing and sampling. We took all of our water and soil samples during this time, and then we also tested certain water parameters on the site. We went back a couple of weeks later for our second field visit to do dynamic cone penetrometer testing. We found the loose and dense soil layers with this test and found where our berms on the ponds would be more likely to fail due to a shearing force. Ongoing during this time, we were doing laboratory testing of our water and soil samples that we took during our first field visit. Here's an overview of what we did during the second half of our spring semester. We took our literature review, our results from our analyses in our laboratory, and then our preliminary project design, and drafted a technical report, and then we also drafted an oral presentation of these findings. We then discussed what it means to be a service learning course. We are one of very few courses in the College of Engineering to be a service learning course, which just means that we get to do like real life projects like this treatment wetland for the city of Norman. We then revised everything into final presentation and reports. We delivered our final reports to the Environmental Engineering and Science Advisory Board, and then we are doing our final presentation now. So why a wetland treatment system? Well, it hits all of the removal mechanisms for CECs, such as sulfamethoxazole, pictured on the right. It is also efficient at reducing excess nutrients from the water when designed for that. And it can serve as an environmental buffer for tertiary treatment before going to Lake Thunderbird. Here are a few different types of wetlands that we will see later in this presentation. The first being, up in the top left, the free water surface wetland. This is the wetland you would most likely think of when you're thinking of a wetland. It has freestanding water, and it slowly moves from one end to the other. This type of wetland is good for aerobic degradation, phytoremediation, photodegradation, volatilization, and some sorption to the soil. The other two are the horizontal subsurface flow wetland, pictured in the bottom left, and the vertical flow wetland in the right. These wetlands are similar in that the water flows through the subsurface of the soil. The main difference being that in the horizontal subsurface flow wetland, the water flows from one end to the other under the soil, and in the vertical flow wetland, it is pumped on top of the soil, and then it goes straight down and is collected in perforated pipes below. Both of these wetlands are better for anaerobic degradation and sorption to the soil media. So what are contaminants of emerging concern? Well, they're potentially hazardous to the environment, animals, and humans. They contain many different types of things that we use in everyday use, such as pharmaceuticals and personal care products. These things are unregulated, and they are not currently targeted for treatment by the Norman Water Reclamation Facility. Our project is located south of the Norman Water Reclamation Facility, along Jenkins Avenue, in between the street and the effluent stream. It is made up of two ponds that used to be minnow ponds, and a north field that is also available to be used by groups if they determine it is needed. Here are a few pictures of what we did during some of our field visits. The one on the left is us taking water samples at the NWRF outfall. The picture in the middle is us using the dynamic cone penetrometer test on the soil, on the berm in between the two ponds. And then the picture on the right is us using a handheld auger to take soil samples in the north field. To go into a little bit more detail about our water sampling and testing, we sampled at 5 different locations pictured in the picture on the right, the 5th being right beside our site location. We sampled for things such as pH and dissolved oxygen in the site, and then we took 26 additional samples back with us to the laboratory to be analyzed further. To go into more detail about our soil sampling and testing, we sampled at 54 different locations pictured on the left, some in the north field, some in the bottoms of the 2 ponds, and then on the berms around it. We took a core sample of each foot up to a 3-foot depth, so 3 sampling cores at each sample location. This led to a total number of 172 samples. The picture in the middle, you can see us taking a core and putting it into a bag to be taken back to the laboratory to be analyzed further. And then the picture on the right is us using the dynamic cone penetrometer test. Here are a few of the things that we analyzed in the laboratory. In the water analyses, we analyzed biochemical oxygen demand, total suspended solids, metal concentrations, anion concentrations, and then fecal indicator bacteria. But we did a presence-absence test on the fecal indicator bacteria, and we did not actually measure a concentration count. For the soil, we analyzed the particle size distribution. You can see that in the picture on the right, moisture and organic matter content, and then cation concentrations, and we measured the hydraulic conductivity of the soil as well. We did pull some secondary data for when we were completing this project. From the city of Norman, we got light detection and ranging data. This is just the elevation data of our site. The other data we got from the City of Norman was the effluent water quality data from their outfall from 2017 to 2022. We also pulled data from the Thornton thesis in 2017, where they studied CECs found in the Norman Water Reclamation Facility effluent. We got a subset of 98 different CECs from that study, and we used those to aid us in the completion of our project. Here are the results of some of our water analyses. The most important being that nitrate and nitrite and phosphorus were slightly nutrient rich, and that there were fecal bacteria present in the water. Here are the results of some of our soil analyses. Some things to note are that the organic matter and moisture contents were low compared to average soils. The soil classification was mostly sandy across the entire of our site, which could indicate the need for a liner if our groups determine that. And then one final thing to note is that the nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations were slightly less rich in the nutrient level, which could hinder vegetation growth. Now I'm going to hand it off to Anthony Garcia from Puddle Bear Wetland Solutions.
Hello, thank you, Liz. My name is Anthony. I am representing Puddle Bear Wetland Solutions, and I'm going to go ahead and show you our 3 design alternatives as well as our design proposal. Now, to begin, I would like to introduce my team members, Kylie Martin, who worked in soil and water data analysis and CAD GIS modeling, Samantha Taylor as our leader in general wetland design and water treatment, myself in the water treatment and hydraulic design, Elena Avila in wetlands vegetation and water treatment, Matthew Variali in public acceptance and soil data analysis, and last but not least, Yassine Awazan in finances and soil and data analysis. Now, we did come up with a weighted ranking system in our evaluation criteria. Here, as you can see, we have 3 criteria. For the criteria is cost, public approval, and removal efficiencies, ranging from different types of things that we considered for these evaluation. Cost being 50%, 25% for public approval, and 25% for removal efficiencies. Now for our first design alternative, we did come up with a free water surface to a free water surface, free water surface wetlands in both of the ponds. As you can see here in the white arrows, that's the flow pattern of the water going through both wetlands. For the conveyance system we have here at the beginning is a pump and pipe system to pump out that water from the stream into the north pond or the free water surface in the north pond, and then traveling from west to east and down to the south pond through an open channel, and then as it goes through the south pond out of it into the stream through another open channel as well. And here on the right side we have a breakdown of the construction cost as well as operation and maintenance for a 20-year lifespan, construction being $300,000, operation and maintenance, again, for a 20-year lifespan to be $47,000 for a total of $347,000. Yeah. For our second design alternative, we have a free water surface wetland into a horizontal subsurface flow wetland, same flow pattern of the water, as you can see with the white arrows. Same conveyance system with the pump and piping system, as well as the open channel system. Now, in the bottom, in the south pond, we have a horizontal subsurface flow where Liz explained where the water flows on subsurface of the ground. And on the right side, as you can see here, we have a breakdown again of our construction and maintenance, construction and operation and maintenance costs for a 20-year lifespan. $492,000 for construction and $132,000 for operation and maintenance, for a total of $624,000. Now for our third design alternative, as you can see, it's also a big bring up for the construction costs as well as operation and maintenance. And for the design, same flow pattern system, as you can see with the white arrows, but now we would like to add a pump and piping system on the right side of the wetlands in order to bring that water over and distribute it with a perforated pipe over the wetland and therefore travel down, straight down as it is a vertical wetland, and out with a piping system as well. And for the construction cost is $568,000. Operation and maintenance is $165,000 for a 20-year lifespan, for a total of $733,000. Now, for our proposed design, we did want to go to the first alternative, and here's a breakdown based on the weighted percentages for the ranking system that we came up with. For public approval, that is ecosystem services and educational opportunities, those being research opportunities for students at the University of Oklahoma, as well as faculty members, as well as for the public to get to know the functions of the wetland in order for them to visit. And then for removal efficiencies, we have up to 40% phosphorus removal from the water, as well as possible CEC removal mechanisms that could be potential for this wetland system. Now for costs, as I mentioned earlier, it is $347,000 in net present worth, and it is the lowest cost compared to our other two design alternatives. And here, as you can see, we have a profile view of the wetland system, the free water surface wetland system. Now, in terms of our water quality parameters, we did look at the Texas Administrative Code, or TAC, for surface water augmentation for reclaimed water. And as you can see here, for the list of turbidity, biological oxygen demand, and fecal bacteria, they all meet the Texas Administrative Code. They meet that criterion. Now for phosphorus, we would like to have that maximum removal of phosphorus from that water, but we deemed 40% to be acceptable. Now, in terms of CECs, or contaminants of emerging concern, removal efficiencies, we did look at this suite of CECs as well as their types, ranging from endocrine disrupting contaminants, as well as pharmaceutical and personal care products, as well as others. Now, in terms of our literature review and extensive research on CEC removal rates, there is a varied estimates for these percentages. So there's not necessarily anything concrete about that, but we did, with our free water surface system into a free water surface overall, those CEC mechanisms will be present in that system. Therefore, for example, phytoremediation, photodegradation, sorption, biodegradation, and those mechanisms that would otherwise remove those CECs in the water. Now, in terms of our design hydraulics, here we have our calculations for this wetland system. We have 52 gallons per minute for our flow rate, an operating volume of 1.8 million gallons, a hydraulic retention time or holding time for the water for 17 days, a hydraulic loading rate of 1.6 inches per day, and a total wetland area of 1.59 acres. Now, in terms of our vegetation that we would like to have in our system, we would like it to be obviously aquatic. We would like it to be native to Oklahoma, perennial, as well as aesthetically pleasing, functional, and non-invasive. And here we have a few pictures of the vegetation that we decided to have it in our system. For example, here we have the lance-leaf frog fruit, as well as the American bulrush on the right side as well. Now, lance-leaf and frog fruit, as well as the common duckweed, those are efficient to removing nitrogen as well as phosphorus. And then for softrush and American bulrush, those are efficient to removing CECs, specifically pesticides. Now, in terms of our geotechnical considerations, we would like to have substrate of mixed natural substrate as well as mixed with biochar. Natural substrate would promote healthy vegetation growth, and biochar will promote high adsorption or sorption of those contaminants to the soil so we can remove them from the water. Now, for the PVC liner, we would like to have a PVC liner in our system in order to prevent water filtration as well as promote stability in the system, in the ponds. Now, there is a berm that is washed out on the south pond on the east, and we would like to look into rebuilding that berm in order to have that water retention, in order to have that stability in the wetland system. And this is our final design. As you can see, we have a free water surface up over here, as well as going into our another free water surface, and then you can see vegetation and how it would look like for this system specifically. Then up next, we have Holly Jones with Octo Engineering, and she will also show you their designs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Hello, everyone. My name is Holly Jones, and I am representing Octo Engineering. Our team has 6 members. Annie Gilliam was in charge of hydrologic modeling. Jacob Cullifer is our team leader, and he looked into general wetland design. I focused on water treatment. Abdallah Al-Balushi was our cost analyst. Nathaniel Wright was our vegetation specialist and water data analyst. And Elizabeth Watts was our soil and water data analyst. Our first wetland alternative consists of a horizontal subsurface flow wetland, followed by a free water surface wetland. As you can see, sorry, I cannot find this mouse. Okay. As you can see over here, we would connect the 2 ponds with an open channel system. And then we would construct a stair-step structure to help aerate our water after it's gone through our system at our outflow point. Oops, sorry. So the media that we chose to put in our horizontal subsurface flow wetland is dolomite gravel. This wetland is good at promoting anaerobic digestion and microbial degradation along with adsorption. This free water surface flow wetland would help promote phytoremediation with the plants that we plant in there and volatilization along with photodegradation to the sunlight. As you can see, we have varying depths in this free water surface wetland, so we can utilize different types of vegetation. We could have free-floating plants in the deeper area and plant other vegetation in the shallow area. And both ponds, we would have to add a 6-inch clay liner to prevent water from seeping out into the ground. And we would bring in hydric soil for the media in the free water surface wetland. We chose to stick with the horizontal subsurface flow wetland and free water surface flow wetland for our second alternative. But as you can see, we would split it up into 2 separate systems. We would have to construct 2 berms within each pond to separate them out. And the advantage to having this system would be that if one system is down or a pump breaks, we can still utilize the other system. It will still function. As you can see with these dashed lines, we would put a bypass system in place. We would stick with the dolomite gravel and hydric soil for these wetlands, but as you can see, we would not add varying depths in the free water surface. For our third alternative, we would utilize that north field area and we would add a vertical flow wetland, followed by the horizontal subsurface and free water surface. The media we would have in this vertical flow wetland would be sand and gravel, and the media for the other 2 stays the same as the first couple options. The advantage for this option is there would be more treatment for different types of contaminants through the vertical flow wetland. However, it's the most expensive out of all 3. With our weighted ranking system, we identified 4 separate criteria that we would use to rank our preferred alternative. We chose performance to be the most important, followed by cost, then land requirements, and public acceptance. We followed the California's standards for their nitrogen levels to be around 10 milligrams per liter or lower. We looked into Wisconsin standards for phosphorus levels of 1 milligram per liter, and we did find removal efficiencies through literature review for contaminants of emerging concern. These were our guidelines that we used to look into performance. For cost, we did consider construction costs, operation and maintenance, and plant replacements that would happen every 5 years. We would have to replace that dolomite media after its adsorption capacity is used up, and with that, the vegetation. We did have some land requirements and constraints with our project site. It is a somewhat small site, but we chose the option, the wetland alternative that would best utilize the space. And we did take aesthetics and public activities into consideration when evaluating public acceptance, the potential to make the area into a park or add benches, anything that would bring the public in and let them enjoy that space. Based on our weighted ranking system, we found that option 1 was our preferred wetland alternative. The horizontal subsurface flow wetland is good for removing nitrogen. The free water surface wetland was good for removing phosphorus, and the entire system would remove our target CECs. We chose 5 target CECs out of those 98 that we found that were given to us in the data of the effluent. Those are sulfamethoxazole, triclosan, trimethoprim, estrone, and diclofenac. And this wetland alternative would also utilize native vegetation such as bulrush, cattails, and water lilies. We would place cattail, bulrush, and maiden cane in the horizontal subsurface flow wetland, and we would plant cattail and bulrush in those shallow areas of our free water surface wetland and have water lily be floating in that deep area. And the water lily does add an aesthetic aspect to the wetland, which is a plus. The physical dimensions of the North Pond, which is our horizontal subsurface flow wetland, it would have a surface area of 23,000 feet squared, the operating volume of 28,000 feet cubed, which that's mainly that dolomite media. When you think of the operating, I apologize. The operating depth is 4.5 feet, and that is that dolomite media. And that's what the bulk of the depth would be. The freeboard is 1/2 foot. For our south pond, the water surface area is about 17,000 feet squared. The operating volume is 39,000 feet cubed. And since we do have varying depths in this pond, we would have 1 foot in those shallow areas and 2 feet in the deep area. And we found that a freeboard of 1 foot would be sufficient, as we have to have a difference in head for that water to travel over into the second pond. We calculated a hydraulic loading rate of 5.5 inches per day, a hydraulic retention time of 8 days, which we found to be sufficient to get removal rates of nutrients and CECs. The wetland flow rate coming in from that NWRF effluent would be about 40 GPM, and the flow rate of the overall system varies plus or minus 2% due to evapotranspiration and precipitation. So we calculated that nitrogen would have a 73% removal rate, phosphorus would have a 55% removal rate, and our target CECs would have varying removal rates, but we did find that a range of 40 to 90% removal would happen with our target CECs in this system. The total cost ended up being $610,000. We took construction costs into consideration. That would be the earthwork to bring in that media and to construct the bottom ponds with the varying depths. The design fee, which is a 20% fee that would go to the engineers, and the startup cost, as well as operation and maintenance, which we accounted for a 20-year span, and that planned replacements that, like I mentioned earlier, where we would have to come in every 5 years and replace that media and vegetation. Up next, we have Daniel Guevara with Nernia Engineering.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Guevara, and I will be representing Nernia Engineering today. Before I talk about our designs, I would like to introduce our team and the work that they did. First, we have Katrina Mason, who is our team leader and was involved with the hydraulics and hydrologic design. Next, we have Lauren Franz, who did the sample data and cost analytics. Ariel Gillen, who is in charge of quality assurance and quality control, as well as the geotechnical design. Enrique Lambert, who is in charge of vegetation as well as public acceptance. And finally, myself, who is also involved with the hydraulics and hydrologic design. So we came up with 3 design alternatives, each with their own layouts and estimated costs. Here we can see our first design alternative, which utilizes the use of a free water surface wetland. The water will come in from the northwest corner and follow the path depicted by the white arrows. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but these black lines represent baffle curtains, and these serve the purpose of altering the water flow path as well as increasing the retention time. The water will follow this serpentine-like flow all the way to the southwest corner, where it will then be transported back to the effluent stream. Construction cost for this was estimated to be $170,000, operating and maintenance over a 30-year time period, $130,000, making the net present worth $300,000. Here we can see our second design alternative. This alternative uses both systems as separate cells, this time the north pond being a horizontal subsurface flow wetland, same as the south pond, with them working in series. It will follow a similar water flow path as the first alternative, entering from the northwest corner of the north pond, where it will flow across the length of the pond, then be transferred down to the south pond, where it will then travel the length, then be transported back to the effluent stream. Construction cost for this was much higher than the first, being around $710,000. Operating and maintenance over a 30-year time period, $111,000, making the net present worth $821,000. Here's our third design alternative. It has the north pond being a horizontal subsurface flow wetland, while the south pond is a free water surface flow wetland. And the water flow path is identical to the second design alternative. Here, the construction cost was estimated to be $580,000, operating and maintenance over a 30-year time period, $100,000, making the net present worth $680,000. In order to evaluate and compare our alternatives, we use a weighted ranking system and used 3 evaluation criteria. The first one was cost, which we gave a weight of 50%. This included the estimated construction and operating and maintenance costs for each alternative. The second was efficiency, which we gave a weight of 35%. And efficiency included the calculated removal rates for nitrogen, phosphorus, and CECs for each alternative. In order to calculate these, we use standards and information found from various sources. For example, nitrate plus nitrite, we had a goal of being below 10 milligrams per liter, which came from a standard set by the California Code of Regulations. Dissolved reactive phosphorus, our goal was to be below 0.09 milligrams per liter, which was set by the US EPA nutrient ecoregions. And for CECs, we used biodegradation rates found from literature review to calculate their removal efficiencies. Our final criterion was public acceptance, which we gave a weight of 15%, and this included the anticipated public perception and feedback to each alternative. Using that system, we were able to assign scores to each one. Alternative 1 ended up scoring the best across the board, making it the winner and our preferred alternative. Here are some more detailed schematics of our preferred alternative. On the left, we have the plan view. On the right, the profile view. From the plan view, we can see the flow of the water depicted by the arrows as it travels across the baffle curtains. From the profile view, we can see that the bottom foot layer is made of soil with the dolomite lime substrate. We can see 3 feet of water depth, as well as 1 foot of freeboard. Also in the profile view, we can see a representation of one of the baffle curtain windows, which will allow water to pass through it. It will be 4 feet by 2 feet, but I should note that this picture isn't to scale. In reality, the window will be much, much smaller. Our design is 335 feet by 235 feet, giving us an area of about 1.8 acres. With the water depth at 3 feet, it makes the volume about 5 acre-feet. And because we have a larger volume, we were able to carry and treat more water, giving us a high flow of 82 gallons per minute. Our hydraulic retention time was found to vary from 49 to 69 days. The hydraulic loading rate will also vary depending on what the retention time is. For a retention time of 49 days, it's 0.67 inches per day, while for a time of 69 days, 0.47 inches per day. Hydraulics of our design include the use of an automated pump that will carry water from the effluent stream to our wetland. This pump will automatically stop whenever the water level in the wetland reaches our maximum design water level in order to avoid any overflow events. We also include the use of emergency spillways, which can be seen on the west side of our system. These spillways will serve the purpose of, if water does go above our intended water depth, it will exit through the spillways, protecting the structural integrity of our berms. 3-inch PVC piping will be used for the inflow and outflow, with a concrete channel being constructed which will carry water from the outflow back to the effluent stream. Geotechnical aspects of our design include the removal of the central berm, and as mentioned earlier, we will use multiple emergency spillways in an effluent channel, which will require some excavation work. After the removal of the central berm, a high-density polyethylene or HDPE liner will be installed along the bottom of the pond. Once this liner is installed, a 1-foot layer of soil with dolomite substrate will be placed on top, and this substrate serves the purpose of providing nutrients to the submerged vegetation, as well as acting as a sorption surface for phosphorus removal. Various vegetation species were chosen for our design, and they were categorized based on their purpose. For example, we chose plants that had the ability to remove phosphorus and nitrogen, such as the eelgrass right here. We also considered plants that would be able to remove CECs from the water, such as the river clubrush. And we also considered plants that would help reduce the local mosquito population, such as the arrowhead. Here we can see the removal efficiencies for our target contaminants. For nitrate plus nitrite, we were able to meet our goal of being below 10 milligrams per liter, with seeing a removal rate of up to 96%. For dissolved reactive phosphorus, we were not able to meet our goal of being below 0.09 milligrams per liter. However, we were able to see a removal rate up to 82%. The target CECs we chose were acesulfame, caffeine, acetaminophen, sucralose, and sulfamethoxazole. These removal efficiencies vary due to the high number of factors that come into play when it comes to removing CECs from wastewater. As for our cost estimate, capital costs came out to be $170,000, and this would include the cost of installing the liner and baffle curtains, cost for the pump and piping, vegetation costs, as well as the excavation work, operation and maintenance costs over a 30-year time period, $130,000, and this included typical wetland maintenance, unexpected pump and pipe issues, the reharvesting of vegetation, as well as labor costs. Combining these gives us a net present worth of $300,000. Now back to Elizabeth with some closing remarks.
All right. We have some recommendations for this project. The first is to compile a database of measured CECs in the Norman Water Reclamation Facility effluent. A larger database would help us to identify what the most important CECs are to remove based on concentrations from day to day. Another recommendation is to develop design criteria for CEC removal based on mesocosm studies. These mesocosm studies could help us to find stronger removal rates and removal mechanisms from the treatment wetland. One final recommendation that we have is to assess the viability of using the underlying groundwater as an environmental buffer. The Norman Water Reclamation Facility is allowed to discharge to the underlying groundwater since it is considered a water of the state, much like the Canadian River, which is where the Norman Water Reclamation Facility discharges to now. Using the underlying groundwater as an environmental buffer would help to gain sorptive mechanisms for CECs to be removed from the water. Here are some limitations that we had with this project. The land area available is very small. We were really constricted to the 2 ponds in the field north above, which reduces the fraction of effluent that we can treat with the treatment wetlands. The second limitation is that CEC concentrations in the effluent are highly variable. This is because CEC concentrations depend on a day-to-day basis based on what people put into the wastewater in the city of Norman. So one day, a certain CEC could be at a high concentration, and the next, it could be found at a low concentration in the effluent. A third limitation is that design criteria for CEC removal in wetlands do not exist. There has not yet been enough studies done on CEC removal in wetlands to determine what the appropriate removal rates are. One final limitation is that the site could be flooded from the Canadian River since it lies in the 100-year floodplain of the Canadian River. Some final conclusions are that CEC removal is not well characterized. As more literature comes out about CEC removal, it will be more efficiently removed in treatment wetlands because it can be more efficiently designed. One more conclusion is that nature-based solutions such as these treatment wetlands can be used for indirect potable reuse. These treatment wetlands have effective nutrient removal, and this is not a new technology as other states already implement this for their water reclamation facilities. One drawback to the treatment wetlands is that they are land intensive, but they are economical to make up for it. We would like to thank Stephen Hardman, Chris Mattingly, Michelle Ludenbach from the City of Norman, James Queen, Justine McCann, Mackenzie Dorman, and Steiner Dolly from the Center for Restoration of Ecosystems and Watersheds. Dr. Russell Dutnell for helping us with our LiDAR data. Dr. Gerald Miller for helping us with the dynamic cone penetrometer test, and as well with our Atterberg limits test to our soil. We would also like to acknowledge Shelley Chard, Jason Masoner, Nathan Kuhnert, Steve Hardman, Chris Mattingly, Michelle Lundbach, Kyle Arthur, and Amanda Nairn from the Environmental Engineering and Science Advisory Board. Thank you. We are now open for questions. I'd like to invite our team leaders up to.
Well, yeah, go ahead and give them a round of applause. That was great. Well, so first off, I'll just say, great job. It was a very detailed presentation. I can tell you guys obviously know what you're talking about. So this is a very fascinating topic to me, and could not be coming at a more timely time. You obviously know that stormwater and water in general are just pretty hot topics here in Norman. So I think we're here to ask some really good questions on this. So I'm going to go ahead and open up to my council member colleagues if they have any questions. I believe Councilmember Schuler, sharp view.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to jump in the middle of presentations because that's typically what we do. So I was trying to take some notes of some of the questions that I had. I guess I have some initial comments, I think. I just really appreciate seeing a capstone class come and do a pilot project and then come and present it to us at the city. I want to see more of these things happen with our students because OU is such an asset to our community, and I think that this really showcases what kind of talent we can provide to come up with solutions that better our community. So I just really want to thank you for the work that you're doing and for whoever your professor was that chose this as a project and was able to kind of like collaborate on that. One of the things that I do in my day job is work with students on kind of civic engagement more broadly around the country. And I've been fighting for more integration of civic engagement type curriculum in the classroom. And this is exactly what this looks like. And also, let's check the box for it also being in a STEM field, which is really important. And I think that a lot of STEM professors are maybe scared to do projects like this. And so I think that you are showcasing how this can really be used to show our students how they get involved in kind of civics and politics, right? And that how that really affects our communities. So just kind of huge kudos all around for that. I guess some of the questions that I had were related to, I think I kind of was getting in there at the end, but you were using guidelines that were not from the state of Oklahoma for phosphorus and nitrogen, and also commented that the CECs, we don't have any guidelines for what those look like. Does Oklahoma not have guidelines, or are we currently not using wetlands? Like, can someone extrapolate on why that is?
So the guidelines or some preliminary guidelines for IPR in the state of Oklahoma actually got published during our class, which was really exciting for us to see. We all chose to focus on guidelines that are happening in states where this is kind of a more common thing, where there are already projects that are actually implemented and happening. Because these are pilot scale wetlands, they're not, going to be held to a regulatory criteria if they're implemented. And they're really there to inform science for the future implementation of a full-scale project, hopefully. So.
Awesome, thank you. And then my second, I guess, I saw that the third group in all of their design alternatives gave us the cost, which as an elected official and as an elected body thinking about how we're spending our precious kind of funds and resources, it's really important. So the first question that I was gonna ask to the first group is, can we get more data on your different alternatives, right? So what is the cost? What is all of the different, sorry, I'm gonna try to go back here, like the efficacy of each of those different things, because I will tell you that we'll have consultants come in and provide information and data on, here are the 3 alternatives that we have, come up with that you can select from. And I can tell you that every single time we take guidance from our experts, but we have large, robust conversations about why we would choose one over the other. And so having all of the data presented to us is really important. So we can kind of dig into the numbers. And I really appreciated that you also gave your kind of evaluation, like how you were evaluating each of the different alternatives, right? Was it cost, performance, public acceptance, all of those different things. So this isn't really a question, but just saying like guidance to the future when you're coming to an elected body, give us as much information as you can in certain areas. And that way it's already just presented to us and then we can kind of dig in a little bit more. So overall, just really great work. So thank you.
Also to echo Councilmember Schuler's praise, thank you so much for presenting. Felt like I absorbed a lot of information. My only question was, what happens to the spent materials, like the plants and the substrate? I think dolomite was the one mentioned. Where does that go?
We didn't really explore what would happen after it's disposed of. It's lost its sorption capacity, but I guess it could still be used as a sediment somewhere else. I know.
Would it be contaminated and you would be concerned about how it would be disposed of?
Potentially, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
If it absorbs CECs to a significant concentration, it could be hazardous. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would also love data about like where does it go? How does it get disposed of? Okay. But thank you.
Councilmember Holman.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I agree fully. That was very informative. A couple of questions I did have is the samples that were used, were those taken after the water had already been through our treatment plant? Okay. And then the land that this was done on, who owns that currently? Is that university property, or is it city, or is it the Potts family?
So that's actually a bit of a hot topic. That was something that we kind of ran into complications with even during our project. It seems like there's a land division or like a property line that goes diagonally through the area that we were interested in. Word on the street is that the city, like part of it's owned by the city and the other part is private land. So supposedly the city, I mean, I don't want to speak for you guys, but what I heard is that the city is working on acquiring the rest of that land. But yeah, politics that we kind of
understand.
Get into.
Thank you. And then is the way I understand this is that would the stream be rerouted so that it runs through the wetland and then comes back into the existing stream? So would there be like a existing gap that is eliminated or something like that? Is that how I understand this?
So there's an existing stream that carries the NWRF effluent, and we would divert only a fraction of that to the wetlands. So we wouldn't entirely build a new stream rerouting it. We would take a small percentage of that, run that through our wetlands, and then bring it back to the effluent stream. So the stream itself pretty much remains full capacity except for the little portion in between where it's taken for the wetlands.
So ideally not all of the outflow would be going through this wetland. It would just be capturing some percent of it. Is that?
Yeah, based on like the land available and the volume of the ponds, we wouldn't be able to take all of the effluent.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Appreciate that. I got a couple questions. One, how does a project like this scale up? Does double the size equal double the results, or are there efficiencies gained or lost, or how does that work?
I don't think it's exactly like a one-to-one scale. Like you can't just double it and get the same results, especially on like a much larger scale. So that would have to be looked into.
Okay. I figured that was probably the response. Did you guys look at or consider how this might apply towards, say, Little River and Lake Thunderbird, as that water approaches the lake, being able to pre-treat it before it gets to the lake, and then, you know, basically kind of reducing the demand on our treatment plant and things like that?
Did you mean treating Little River water?
Right. Or just really just kind of an upscaled version of this application?
So I guess the upscale version of this would be to treat the whole effluent water and then potentially reroute that into Lake Thunderbird as that would be the indirect potable reuse. The wetland would be the midpoint between. I think it would be put back into Day Blue Creek, and then that would flow into Lake Thunderbird.
That's actually the exact answer I was asking for, so I appreciate that. Well, that's all I really had. I mean, again, thank you guys for presenting this. I think you did a really great job, and obviously you guys have all pretty bright futures ahead of you, so hopefully those futures are involved in Norman, but it sounds like we've got another question.
Yeah, not necessarily to the students, more to city staff. I know that you were thanked on this presentation, so you're probably well aware of what was going on. I guess my question is, how do we move forward with potentially doing some kind of, official pilot program where we actually construct the wetlands and maybe even more to what Councilmember Peacock was talking about? So thanks, Chris.
Basically, we love it and we want more.
So that's a big question, but a good question. So Nathan with BOR, Jason Masoner, there's a team right now looking at building a pilot wetlands down in this area. So we appreciate this work because this is kind of a starter to see what it would even, how would we start that? One of the first problems, Shelley, with DEQ is you can't really take our effluent and go put that straight in the, into a wetlands without a permit. But by them going and getting the creek water, that was one of my questions for you too, getting the creek water down from the effluent, now it's not an effluent anymore, now it's just part of the creek water. And I wanted to know, is it still characterized, was it just like our effluent, or did it get diluted a lot, or? Perfect. Excellent. So that's excellent news. So now we just need a water board permit, which is easier to get than a DEQ permit, to pull it out of that creek. Sorry, Shelley. But then you could put it through these wetlands, just pump, and they were talking 80 gallons a minute. That's 1% of our flow. We discharge 11 million gallons a day, so this would be 1% of that. And then we just see if these plants can work. And that was another question I have, is on the plants in the summertime, they're healthy and green and doing their thing. What about in the winter? Will we still get any treatment, or is it kind of turn off, it's, just go dormant? Still UV photolysis or something? Excellent. Or absorption. Okay, that's good. And I like the question on the dolomite, where are we going to do with when we take and remove that? Because we do the same thing with arsenic. We put it on activated carbon, and then we have to go throw it away, and it has our name on it forever. So, so what we're doing, back to my point, so we're really, they have money, they're spending like $800,000 a year, I believe, for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Is that right? 550,000. Their internal money. I mean, we're not doing anything except letting them play in our sandbox. And so then they're going to do wetland research to see if Norman can use wetlands in either for our stormwater, for our effluent. Could they be used before or this high advanced treatment that we just did the pilot on, or after as another polishing, an extra buffer? The Little River question's a good one because eventually we're going to have a north side wastewater treatment plant, about 2038. Could that then go into through wetlands to enter up to the Little River? This one's more focused on, we're doing it right along the, it'll go to the Canadian River just for us to study, but later, that's right, put it in the Dave Blue and go into that leg of the lake if it's allowed. So anyway, we got a lot. This is barely the start of a lot of stuff, but really plays well into what we're already working on, spending a lot of money and research, and you guys are kickstarting this off, and it's awesome. So I really appreciate it. I think it's really good.
Okay, awesome. So I just want to make a plug that if you're interested in doing these things moving forward, I don't know what your trajectories are, but it sounds like, and I mean, I know that from my perspective, there's a lot going on with Norman for this. So like, hire these students so they can stay here and work on our wetlands moving into the future. So thank you.
I absolutely agree with that. And yeah, since Mr. Mattingly had a chance to ask a few questions, I guess I'd ask the rest of staff if you guys, wanted to take this opportunity to ask any questions. I mean, they're here, so. Okay, all right, sounds good. Oh, no, that sounds great.
Yeah,
Please
come
do,
up.
yeah, please. And if you wouldn't mind telling us what your name is and.
I'm Rachel Croft. I'm a utility staff engineer. But one of my main questions was about the public perception that each group looked at. Did you guys only look at like IPR as a whole, what people would perceive that as, or was it just mainly as aesthetics based on the different scenarios of the wetland types?
Can you come to the, sorry, it's for the recording. They can't hear you if you're not on the mic.
So could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so my question was based on the public perception that you guys used to do your evaluation. Was it based on looking at IPR as a whole, what people would perceive that as, or just aesthetically looking at the wetlands, what people might want to see in that sense?
Okay. Well, yes, it was actually a study for IPR from a treatment wetland in California. And generally, the public was really concerned about the efficiency of it. So all of our public acceptance percentage was basically tied into the efficiency.
So you guys also had pretty different retention times. Not saying one is right or wrong, but I was kind of curious how each of you came up with that. Did you I'm sure that you guys looked at what the nutrient levels were, but also did you look at what it could be in the summertime when it's, you're getting more nutrients and it's hotter outside? Did you look at that? Maybe that's why they were a little different. I was just kind of curious.
So at least for Narnia, we had a retention time that was especially long compared to other groups because of the baffles we plan to put in. Based on volume and flow rate alone, we would actually have like a theoretical retention time of 14 days, but we tried to estimate, like baffles would extend the retention time, and so we estimated based on the longer flow path we would have the water travel through and some estimated velocities of the water to come up with that range of 49 to 69 days. But as for setting the flow rate, that was mostly, we were aiming for the retention time of 14 days. It wasn't based on nutrients or anything.
All right, anybody else? Last call. All right, here we go.
Steve Hardeman, Plant Manager, Water Reclamation. I just got a question about CDCs. The CDCs that was found in our wastewater, which ones are the hardest to remove? And either personal care products, CDCs, or pharmaceuticals? And how would the wetlands take care of that?
So based on the data that we were looking at, sucralose was one to be with really high concentrations. And so those type of CDCs, if I bring it down to a type, PPCPs or pharmaceuticals and personal care products, those seem to be the more that we saw of CECs in the data that we were looking at. And these wetland types have different CEC removal mechanisms. At least for free water surface, there's a variety of mechanisms that would eventually remove these CECs from the water. And so those specific ones would be able to be more efficient. And say, for example, for puddle bear, free water surface, you have that exposure to sunlight, so you have that photodegradation. We have the biochar that we chose for our substrate that would remove those CECs from sorption to the biochar. We have phytoremediation that would remove those pesticides from those vegetation that we chose, as well as other ones that would eventually happen, like microbial degradation, as well as others as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. For reference, what is sucralose?
Sucralose is a sweetener.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where is it found?
Do you mean like in everyday products?
Yes.
And I guess if I could come up with, like, in my head, would be like in those sugar packets or in any usage for everyday usage for people to use those sweeteners in their everyday functions.
Okay.
I would say, yeah.
Well, again, thank you guys so much for presenting this. This is a topic that I just think is absolutely fascinating. Please.
I am the Dr. Bob. There's two Dr. Bobs. I am the Dr. Bob. Thank you for your comments about the service learning and things like that. I just wanted to make you aware, this is not the first project that we've done on this. We did a study up Dave Blue Creek. Bob can tell you what year. We have modeling studies on that. And we'd be glad to provide that information to you. And in any and all the data that we have, you want it, we'll get it to you. It'll inundate you, but we'll get it to you. But we have other information. So we've done a lot of projects in Norman. We've done projects all across the state. All of them are service learning oriented classes. We've done it Grand Lake. We've been to Lake Francis. We've been all over the state. This is what we really like to do, is get them a real world project with a lot of pressure on them, and they perform. They do a fantastic job. But we have more information for you.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head of the value of being a university town right there. And so you guys are a resource that we'd be fools to not take advantage of. So I'd love to see the work that you guys have done in the past. And I'd actually just love to see another like one of these projects come through next year. So please keep up the good work. And yeah, you guys are always welcome to come present in this committee. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up that topic, move on to the next one. Again, thank you guys. Really appreciate you. So we'll give you another one. All right, second item on our agenda tonight is presentation from Johnson Controls on their performance-based efficiency program and possible application in city facilities. Caleb, I believe the floor is yours, sir.
After that presentation, I kind of felt like mine should be done in crayon. I was kind of proud of myself, though. I recognized some of the chemicals that they had up there, like H2O and stuff like that. Yeah. My name is Caleb Cameronis. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak to you. I've had a couple of you over to our manufacturing plant, take a look over there, and I'm excited to explore with you how expanding the existing partnership with Johnson Controls into a performance-based project may or will enable the city of Norman to take advantage of the intersection of multiple interests in facilities, facility infrastructure, efficiency, sustainability, as well as financial responsibility. Here we go. All right, so on the agenda, we'll spend a little bit more time digging into why exactly we're here, and then how we can help, and finally, why it matters. Those are three very good things to talk about, right? All right, so over the last year, roundabouts a year, I've spoken with multiple members of your team and really trying to get an understanding of the direction that Norman wants to go, like I said, in facilities and sustainability. And working with the facilities team, Mr. Jason's team, with Mr. Wade Thompson, he was able to sum up the facility situation and some of their goals, as well as their challenges. So their challenges primarily, he summed it up with long-term deferred maintenance caused by budget constraints, is increasing facility infrastructure failure beyond internal capability and resources. That team is working on solutions to the majority of those issues. And I understand that they recently submitted a budget request for the upcoming budget to do a facilities study and understand exactly what their situation is and start. Without the study, you really can't put a plan together on how to address all of it. So they're working on solutions. In a parallel path, we've worked or had conversations with the EGCAB group and their work implementing the Mayor's Climate Agreement and a lot of the important things that they find in there, like improving energy efficiency through renovations of existing facilities, increase the use of alternative energy sources, just like they did at the water treatment plant with the 2 megawatts of solar out there. It's a fantastic project. and the inventory of emissions baseline, the reductions target and plan. And all of this in an effort to address the goals for Ready for 100. So digging into exactly why we're here. Many cities, when we go and have conversations, the problems are very similar. It's not easy to run a city. And usually what we see is this idea of set amount of revenue. There's only so much money that's coming into the city, but costs slowly increase. And the first thing that usually takes a hit when the budget starts to see issues like that is equipment, right? Maybe we won't do the maintenance on this item exactly the way that it needs to be done. We'll put it off, and that turns into some deferred maintenance. And over time, you start to see problems with asset management and operational efficiency. Are we being proactive, or are we responding to issues? And that gets into the area of sustainability, right? Are we taking care of the assets that we have in order to extend their life expectancy? And that draws away from focusing on your core mission, right? A city is tasked with efficient and quality service. And if the facilities team is being reactive and not able to handle all the problems that they have due to the budget constraints, then it pulls away from your core mission. So how can we help with a problem like that? So, like I said, we work on performance-based projects. And what we do is we initially take a look at the current operational budget. And what we're trying to achieve is an increase in efficiency. So we look throughout town on all the areas where we can affect electric, gas, water consumption, and really drive those down. But when you increase efficiency, you create savings in the budget. And all we're trying to do is capture those savings and redirect them into projects around town that do not currently have a funding source. Are there any questions on that?
I like the sound of that.
Right. So redirecting savings via efficiency. These are not conclusive, right? This is just a summarization, or really more of the typical facility improvements that we work on. But LED retrofits, interior, exterior buildings, street lighting, security lighting, HVAC systems, efficient plumbing systems, sustainability projects, whether solar or biogas, and control systems, and then improving the building envelope. So we can pump all the cold air into it that we want to. If it's leaking out doors and windows, then we got problems. So very similarly, Johnson Controls is working on our own project, right? So we don't just tell other people that they should do it. We work on these projects ourselves. But as you can imagine, Johnson Controls being an international company, it's very hard to point at one specific manufacturing plant and say, that's where we're going to start. But in our own sustainability efforts, Norman, Oklahoma was our very first project, or our very first manufacturing plant that we're executing one of these projects on. So when we stood back and looked at all the manufacturing plants worldwide and tried to decide where are we going to implement our first project, you can imagine there was a lot of conversation on that. And bang for your buck is really where it goes, right? So how do we increase efficiency? And just like you, we're concerned with finances as well. So two intersecting goals of sustainability and financial success. And those coincided the best with the Norman plant, or the York plant here in Norman. So as you can see, that's really our plan over the next 20 years to implement our own sustainability project and get as close to net zero as we possibly can. And very similarly to what we're talking about right now is, lighting or HVAC or control systems, things like that. We implemented that project for ourselves. So when we implemented, the biggest heavy hitters on that project were the HVAC. You can imagine it takes a lot of power to cool that plant. When we swapped out the chiller system or when we swapped out the LEDs, that created a lot of savings in our budget. And all we're doing is capturing those because the savings exist in year 1, but they also exist in year 2, year 3, and year 4. And with a project like this, we're able to capture all of that time and devote those savings directly to the purchasing of the equipment. So why it matters, we talked a little bit about the goals and challenges that the city's facing and what a project like this achieves, the solutions and outcomes that we're able to put forward for something like this, is it saves and reinvests into needed projects that do not have another funding source. Preserves capital and preserves capital for needs without a payback. So we're working on or prioritizing projects that taking projects off of the capital improvement plan list and enabling you to use your capital on projects that don't have a very quick ROI. Helps stabilize the operating capital budget. Like I said, if we're taking projects off of the capital improvement list, we're unburdening it and making it easier to make the snowball roll further. So it avoids future increased costs by accomplishing work now, right? We're addressing problems. We're not watching inflation and the increase in manpower take its toll. We're driving innovation and community engagement. That's a big one with the groups like ECAB that spend a lot of their time trying to come up with solutions. It's not easy. So workforce development, creating jobs through projects like this, guaranteed energy savings. So in the process of a project like this, if we communicate to the City of Norman, contractually agree on this is the amount of money in the utility spend that we can save, then we guarantee those dollars. So if, I'm making numbers up because I really don't know, but if we communicate to Norman, we can save the City of Norman $100,000 in your utility expense, and the first year of the project, you only save $75,000, then Johnson Controls is responsible to make the City of Norman whole. And full choice and customized project scope. I really like this portion of the project because if we proceed forward, what we do is we partner with city staff and some of yourselves, if you wanted to be involved, groups like Michelle's group at ECAB. And what we do is we begin to put a plan together. I can send my engineers out to city facilities and find a lot of the issues out there that the City of Norman needs help with, but that would cost me a lot of money, right? And no one wants to be wasteful. So what we do is we sit down, we do interviews and find out where do you actually want us to look? Where do we need to go and pay attention to the problems? And so in that way, we get directed, right? You take a whole bunch of potential problems and you really start to narrow it down to this is what we need help with, this is what we want you to focus on, and then we focus on those things. And we don't just identify the problems and say, yeah, you're right, these are the problems. We then put a solution together for it. This is how we're going to do it. Our interests lie in conducting the project to implement the solutions to those issues. If we were to move forward on something like this, so we're really in that phase 1, this concept introduction. So it's not a super complicated idea, but you can understand it takes a while to absorb an idea like this. It's a little unique. So concept introduction and ensure that we are on the same page before we proceed to what we call a business case analysis. A business case analysis is where we do a 10,000-foot level. I send my engineering team out. They do a study across the city and really put a plan together to present to the council and say, this is what we think this project's going to look like based off of our experience. Now, that does, we do that at risk, so it does cost Johnson Controls, and we would, we would want understanding from the city. We are actually interested in something like this. We're not just conducting a free study, right? And after we conduct the business case analysis, we present it. If the city is interested in something like that, then we proceed to the first procurement phase. And all we're doing is procuring an investment grade audit. That is the study that we were talking about where we actually put together these solutions with your teams for the problems that they've directed us to. So engineering drawings, specs, things like that, we actually go out and collect our subcontractors that in the scope that we are not able to accomplish ourselves, we put that together as a full package solution. And then we proceed to the presentation to the council. If the council approves the project, then that's step number 5 at the fully executed contract. And that is the first time that the city is actually responsible financially for any of the project. If we do not implement the project, then the investment grade audit, there is a financial responsibility for that. If we do implement the project, it gets rolled into the project and paid for by the efficiencies that we're implementing. That is short and sweet. That's a lot of information very quickly.
No, I mean, I think it makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. It's definitely something I personally am interested just from a sustainability standpoint, and just kind of longevity of city resources, and energy is obviously not getting cheaper by the day, so it's never a better time to do something like this. Go ahead and ask colleagues if you have any questions. I'll start with Councilmember Holman, since I started with you last time.
I think the city of Norman, we need all the help we can get, especially with our facilities and resources that are limited, as you mentioned. So I'm all in with whatever we have to do to try this out.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Councilmember Schuler.
Yes, I think that it's really important that we obviously continue to think about efficiency, not just because of Ready for 100, but just in terms of like the cost savings that you mentioned during your presentation. So, and I think that it's really important that we're partnering with a local business, right? Johnson Controls is one of our manufacturing companies. I understand that it's an international company, but it is kind of a staple of our community, and I think it's one that we're very proud of. So building and continuing that partnership, I think, is really important. I just have some, I guess, technical questions on the slide about how we move forward. You mentioned that if we don't move forward with a fully executed contract, that investment grade audit would be, we would be responsible for paying that. What does that run? Just so that we understand the full, I guess, scope of what we're potentially agreeing to.
And it depends on the scope that you ask us to look at. So we do obviously do our best to make it tolerable. Otherwise, you don't pass go, right? Yeah. So we recently kicked off a project with the city of Stillwater, and they, based on the scope that they asked us to explore, primarily lighting, street lighting, HVAC, building weatherization, and water conservation, it was under $200,000.
Okay.
To put that project together.
Trying to get an idea of what that might be. I guess this might be for Catherine on like the legal side. Is it pretty, I mean, this seems like an atypical approach to the way that we do contract or kind of put out. So like what would the process be legally for us as to, I guess, enter into a partnership or a contract with Johnson Controls?
Thank you for that question. Our own policies and practice require us to do a request for qualifications for a project like this. We wouldn't be able to just contract with JCI or another company without going through a process that was competitive. There are a number of companies that do this out there in the world, and so we would want to do that step first and then bring that back to council to determine whether you want to move forward with the highest ranked proposal.
So we've thrown around the idea before in terms of when we put out RFPs of having a kind of checkbox of are you a local company? Do you operate in Norman? Like, would that be something that we could add to this
Sure.
request?
Yes, and we often do have that as one of the points proposals are scored on is whether they're local or not, and so that would be one here, I would assume.
Okay, awesome.
No, I actually was going to have a similar question. We're not required to take low bidder. It's lowest and most responsive.
No, it's more based on qualifications initially, and with this kind of structure, there's not a price you can assign initially. We'd have to go through several steps, so it would be more qualification-based.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think, we've got an appetite up here to see this kind of taken to the next step, so I'm going to let legal kind of dig into this a little bit and see what we need to do for an RFQ process. And, if you've got, I guess I'll just ask you while you're here, based on kind of your knowledge of Norman, if you were going to pick one project to start with, what jumps out at the top of your head?
So speaking with the facilities team, my understanding is they need help on the HVAC side.
Okay.
You can understand with a project like this, there are projects that are contributors financially and there are projects that are consumers financially. And HVAC is more on the consumer side, but I understand that that's a significant need.
Yeah, that seems one that technology, things are getting phased out. It's, I can't, the term not off the top of my head, but CFCs.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Anyway, yeah, so I personally am fully supportive of this. I'd love to see it taken the next step, so we're going to figure that out and get back with you. Definitely. We really appreciate you showing up tonight and giving us this presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, last item on our agenda tonight is discussion regarding regulation for abandoned shopping carts. I believe we have a presentation from staff on this one.
Yes. So this will just kind of be a little bit of an overview of basically other cities' regulation, how it's treated in other communities, and what that could look like. One of the council members, I think, brought this to our attention, and then it got put on this agenda. So I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what that could look like, because if you ask two different people, you'll probably get two different answers. So let's go through that. All right, and here are some of the pictures that were shared with us of where the shopping carts end up. So this is, I think, like a problem. There are quite a few abandoned shopping carts that do get left out there. I was talking to a bunch of the retailers in our area. They do, one of them said, if you're in the grocery business, you're in the business of losing carts. That's just part of it. It's part of a cost that you're going to have to expect every year. But, one of the Walmarts, they said they bought probably 700 carts in January. They're already down 150 of those. So they're going somewhere, right? And I don't think they lost them in the store. So they're ending up somewhere. And these are the kinds of places they're ending up. A lot of the times they're kind of grouped together, I've noticed, just on my own personal observations. But, in some rare cases, you do get them in a creek or stuff like that. So, and typically I'm assuming it's not easy to drive one of these off-road. So I think they kind of stick towards like public rights of ways and stuff like that, whether they're streets or sidewalks or stuff like that. So I think they are highly visible as well for that reason. So what I've basically distilled a lot of the different ordinances out there from different cities. I've also talked to different city attorneys' offices from across the country just this today, actually, and kind of got their perspective on how it's worked out for them. Essentially, your shopping cart ordinance, it's basically the same mix and match variety of options, right? So at the basic level, individuals cannot remove carts from businesses. That's part of the code. It makes it a clear exception. Because right now, a lot of people have asked, well, isn't it already a crime to take a shopping cart? And then, yeah, that's theft, right? But, the person who might be using it at a point in time, when they're contacted or, when it's viewed by the public, might not be the person who took it from the premises. So at that point, it gets kind of messy in terms of like the legality and like how that person came to be in possession of it. Are they just in possession of stolen property, stuff like that. This would just make it, one, illegal to remove it from the business, but also to be in possession of a shopping cart without permission from the owner when it's not on that retailer's property, right? And you can't as well, you can't take it off, but you also can abandon it. So that would be a separate regulation as well. It also has, a lot of cities tend to focus on the businesses when they're doing a regulation, right? On what the businesses can and can't do. So for example, if you're going to regulate these, I think at a minimum what you have to do is you have to put identifiers on the shopping carts. We have, I don't know how many Walmarts in Norman, right? So if you know, some member of the city staff comes across this Walmart shopping cart, we have no idea which one it goes to, right? And that can be kind of a difficulty because it, you know, there's not like a centralized person you can call for Walmart and have them come pick it up. So, you know, having some sort of identification or having some sort of, you know, corporate specific person who's responsible for picking those up, I think that has to be an important mix into the regulation. Some cities have what's called like, they require business to have an abandoned cart prevention or retrieval plan that is filed with the city. What I've heard from other cities that have implemented requirements like that, it gets to be very unwieldy because you have someone who's like, they're constantly changing them. There's, you know, businesses come and go. And then depending on what requires them to create such a policy, it can get very tiresome for staff. And it's kind of hard to, you know, implement. So that, I think that is kind of something that cities have adopted because they understand that, you know, businesses aren't solely responsible for this issue, right? They're technically victims of a crime because, you know, these carts are getting stolen, but at the same time, they have to be a part of the solution, right? And so how strenuous you know, you don't want to do a wide-ranging regulation that affects a business that doesn't actually have a problem with shopping cart theft. And now you have like, you don't want to require them to put in this system that's like thousands and thousands of dollars if they're not a part of the problem, right? And so, it, you know, a lot of cities, what they do is they say, if you have this many violations or this many shopping carts that have to be retrieved within a 30-day period, you have to file one of these plans. Or you have to put in a magnetic lock system around your parking lot where you can't take those carts out of there. So that's kind of a way to tailor it to the actual stores who are actually experiencing the problem. And then again, that physical disabling device, I don't know if you've been to Homeland on Lindsay. They actually have, so there's a device, it's basically one of the wheels of the shopping cart. There's a sensor in it. And what they have these services where they basically put a geo boundary around the parking lot. And if that shopping cart goes outside of that boundary, the wheel locks up and it's no longer able to be moved. And that keeps it on the premise, right? It's expensive, right? I talked to the store manager of the Lindsay Homeland, and he said, you know, he went from 75 shopping carts a year gone to 2. So, I mean, it's been a lifesaver for him, but keep in mind that that store footprint is very small compared to a Walmart or a Sam's, but of course, the larger the footprint, likely that also correlates with the larger resource that that company has. So, for what that's worth. And so I don't know how council would feel about like requiring such a high cost requirement for all businesses who use shopping carts, but I think that is a possibility, and I think there are ways to kind of thread the needle on that to make it more tailored if that's something council wants to do. And now we get to the part where it gets a little bit more touchy, I think, which what can the city do in this kind of regulatory scheme? Basically, all cities, what they do is they adopt some sort of thing where if they see it in the right-of-way, they have someone is designated to go pick those up. So a lot of the time cities will have, if they have an app, they have something integrated into the app where you can actually just report a shopping cart and some team member will come and they'll pick it up. And then what that means is they take it somewhere to be picked up by the retail owner, right? So there has to be an impound lot for shopping carts, just like there's an impound lot for cars. Now, that would have to be depending on how you do it, you can contract that out. I don't know how we would do that. It's not a, it's kind of a niche service. But it would probably be on city property. And then we'd have to have, of course, a corresponding city department kind of tasked with being the shopping cart towing service, if you will. And we'll have to have an impound lot and stuff like that. Some cities have gone so far as like, you know how like when you have an abandoned vehicle on the side of the road and they like tag it? Sometimes they'll do that with carts. And, 24 hours after your cart's been tagged to come pick it up. And if not, then they'll pick it up then. I think it's probably easier just to pick it up as you see it. And then a lot of cities, what they do is once they pick it up and they impound it, if they don't pick it up within a certain number of days, then you have to pay a fee in order to pick it up. And if you don't pay the fee or come pick it up, then the city at its own cost disposes of it. And keep in mind, I think we pay by per pound or per when we take things to this Oklahoma City dump. So this would be a cost for the city if we did have to dispose of these shopping carts. So, and here's some example procedures that I kind of distilled from what I saw from other communities, and copies of those community ordinances are in your packet as well. So a lot of the times when you go out and you identify abandoned carts, it's a staff-generated activity, right? So either staff who are out on the streets, they see them, and they pick them up, or you have citizens who complain, and then it's a responsive endeavor from city staff. Likely it'll be a combination of both. So keep in mind, right, and I'll talk about this more later, with abandoned carts, we're only talking about abandoned carts in the public right-of-way, right? Because we don't have the authority to go onto a private property to retrieve that cart, okay? In instances, I'm sure we could get permission from private property owners, and they're like, hey, 12 carts just showed up on my front lawn. I don't know what to do with them. I do not have one of those little buggy maneuvering devices that Walmart has. Can you guys come pick them up? We would likely probably do that. But we can't go on private property without that permission. So, and then notice, again, some cities notice. I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. A lot of the times you leave them there, right? And a lot of these companies, what they do is they'll get a call that their carts are there, but they can't go right away. You know, they don't have a team member who's just like deputized to go pick up the carts. So it's usually the general manager who has a truck or a trailer that may or may not be, you know, have been bought with their own money, and then they go pick up the carts themselves 2 days later because that's when they have the time to do it. But by that time, they're already gone, right? So it's a difficult logistical situation for the company. So I think we should just pick them up as we see them if that's the case. And then the retrieval, like I said, some cities require a fee if, you know, after a certain number of times or a certain number of days you don't pick it up. And then again, if no one responds, no one comes picks them up, typically we just dispose of them, right? So considerations, right? This is a logistical nightmare because, you know, it's a logistical nightmare on every single level, right? Because I think what you see is the reason we experience shopping cart theft is a solution to a logistical problem, right? If it's a very fast, easy, efficient way to move belongings from one way to another, especially a large quantity, it's a logistical problem for the companies because, you know, it's hard to keep, you know, these stationary. They have wheels, they're meant to be moved, they're easy to steal. They're like, a lot of the times they're outside where they're easily accessible, where there's no security posted. And it's a logistical nightmare to pick them up and then retrieve them just on your own, right? Likely it would be a logistical, interesting logistical quandary for the city because there's going to be a lot of issues, right? But I think a lot of cities have worked these out. I think they're just, you know, be necessary to the process. Impoundment and retrieval, right? Some city department is going to have to be the one to pick them up, right? Not all city departments have the ability to do that, right? A lot of municipalities use the police, but I don't know how, I mean, we don't really have pickup trucks for our police officers, so it would kind of be difficult to, I don't think you can just hitch it to back and then just, you know, I could see that happening, but it would probably result in a tort claim. Or, you know, likely we might have to, you know, designate a specific department. I think some departments have trucks that they actually use, so that would probably be the best option. I was told today that One truck can probably fit about 10 carts, so that's good information to know. But that's usually how they are getting picked up. But keep in mind, you also need an impound lot, and then you're going to be disposing of these at the city's cost if no one picks them up. And then also you have a staff person who has to run the impound lot, right? And that's going to be, if we do impose fees, we're going to have someone, that could be a very, very time-consuming process for a staff person who already has, a lot of stuff on their plate or already has a full work assignment. So it might necessitate new positions, a new team, something like that. Cost to businesses, right? I mean, the more aggressive you get, keep in mind you're penalizing who are technically victims to a crime, right? I understand they have to be part of the solution, but that doesn't mean, but that's something for the council to weigh as a consideration, right? And then, okay, and finally we get into the criminal enforcement challenges. One thing I didn't mention is, I've touched on it. So you can criminalize the taking and the possession of the shopping carts, but that in and of itself, when you enforce it, that's what we need to be thinking about. So for example, if you see someone who is pushing a shopping cart down a city sidewalk, when we enforce that, there are several considerations, right? One, like let's say that we come across someone who has stolen property, right? We can cite them, but we also can't let them continue to be in possession of the stolen property. This stolen property in particular carries, a lot of items. So the logistical problem is, what do you do with all those items now that you've taken the shopping cart? I think one city has, what I found is, it was in California, they cited a bunch of people and they had burlap sacks to give. That is what they put their materials in. But in the event, this is a solution to problems with littering in the rights of way, right? When you ask someone to empty all the material in that basket, they're probably going to be in the right of way, and they might not have the means to carry it away. So that might create litter as part of the solution. So keep that in mind. And then also, let's say that, we do contact someone, we do impound the cart, and then that person has warrants. Now we also have to impound all of their belongings, right? So, and that also creates a logistical issue for those officers, because now not only do they have a cart to transport, they have like a cart full of personal belongings they have to transport and store and stuff like that. So those are the challenges I see, and those are a lot of the challenges that I've heard from other cities that they've encountered as well. So I think one last thing before I open it up for questions is I have talked to a lot of retailers. Some of the retailers of the larger chain stores are kind of, in a way, they're frustrated because they would like to kind of see the shopping cart thefts go down, but like the boundary measures that they would like implemented, that's a corporate decision, right? And so that's not something they can decide on their own, even if they think they want it. But I think that, those measures are very successful, talking to a few that have them. But I also kind of wanted to dispel any myths that, the retailers aren't taking care of the problem. Because like, I've heard a lot of the, like we've called this retailer and they said they don't want the carts anymore, right? They just think of it as a loss. I don't think that's necessarily true, because from what I hear, these general managers, a lot of the times themselves are the ones going to pick them up, or they have a contractor. So, and they've told me like, hey, happy anytime, just call me, we'll pick them up. So I heard very positive responses from them. I think the problem is with the large retailers that have a large presence, which stores, which carts are they, right? Like Homeland, they only have 3, and they're like, just give them to any 3 of us, and we'll take them, and it's no big deal. But once you get more numbers of stores, then it can be more difficult. So, any questions?
I'm sure we'll have a couple. See the first hand raised down here, Councilmember Holman.
Okay, so since Walmart is the largest, there's 3 supercenters, 2 neighborhood markets, and a Sam's. Do they have any policy that you found anywhere regarding this issue as a company?
No, I didn't specifically ask for any policies they had. I don't even know if they'd necessarily give them to me. They'd probably corporate policies. I think the individual stores probably have unwritten policies of how they deal with it on the local level. But I don't I'm not sure how sophisticated those policies would be in terms of like, you know, and I'm sure, and to get more specific into it, are you talking about like a specific prevention policy maybe?
Like the
Or-
geofencing thing, like Homeland's doing.
I don't know, and I think the store managers I talked to, I doubt they would know either. If it is, it's probably somewhere up in corporate that those policies exist, right?
I would be interested to know if we can find out if Walmart, if there are stores in the United States that they have implemented that because of it being such a big issue,
And-
wherever it may be.
I know at one point, one of the managers of a Walmart here in Norman contacted the city manager, or actually the mayor, asking if we would support them getting some of these measures put into place. And of course, I think the mayor said, sure. But I think my interpretation of what was written was that they were trying to gain support to go to corporate to get the funding and the permission to implement something like that. So I don't know that it's necessarily a local decision.
That's consistent with what I found when I talked to them. One of the managers was like, I'm going to tell corporate today, actually, that I had this conversation with you, because that might also convince them that this is something we need. And I think that, you know, they're trying all they can to get corporate to sign off on it, I think. And having a regulatory structure in place could push that in their favor.
Well, yeah, it would be maybe helpful if we were able to find anywhere where the corporate has made that decision and implemented it somewhere, if they have. Would any precedent for if we were to require it of retailers that we offer some sort of financial assistance to comply with it?
I did not see any financial assistance, no.
Just versus the cost of impounding and discarding it and all the things you mentioned, would it be more cost-effective to say, we'll help you pay for getting that installed so that we don't have to pay for all this other
I take that back.
enforcement stuff?
One thing I did found that was very common in these ordinances is there's not, I don't know if you'd call it an incentive, but it's more of an exception. Like most cities, it's $50 to $100 to retrieve your cart, right? Once we have picked it up from the right of way. If you have put in a boundary system, those fines are waived. So you can come pick them up whenever. You know, they're not going to be picking them up because they're not going to be usually going anywhere. But I think that's how cities have done the incentives.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in incentivizing some way to get businesses to do that. Especially if what you said about Homeland, which is where I shop, the West Lindsay one. It's the first time I had seen that when they installed it a year or two ago, that I had seen anywhere install a geofencing thing like that for shopping carts. And if they've had such a reduction in thefts, it seems.
And the store manager there was doing it himself, so he was like, it's been a lifesaver.
Yeah, so it seems like a good idea for businesses to do. I'd be very interested in seeing what we could come up with to incentivize them to do it instead of requiring it.
Yeah, and I would say that I haven't seen quite any incentives in forms of like monetary incentives or anything. What I have seen is penalties for them that they have not. So for example, if you have so many carts in a certain place, then you're required to, stuff like that. Some cities go pretty hard. They say, if you have this many problems within a year, we do not extend your business license. So a very hefty penalty, but I have not, that's the extent to what I've seen.
Well, I would aim to address the abandoned carts.
Yeah.
I understand the issues that arrive with trying to do something about one that's in use. And I don't necessarily want to put our staff or that person in that situation on the sidewalk in downtown trying to do, so I'm more interested in I don't really get a lot of complaints about shopping carts in motion so much as ones that are left abandoned wherever, all about. So focusing on the abandoned carts, how we can better abate that. And if we could incentivize businesses to do the geofencing, which seems to be the most effective solution, and so those are kind of the 2 points I would want us to focus on when trying to figure this, how to address this issue. So I'm guessing there's no money in like scrap metal, like us recycling it or selling it to somebody that scraps it.
Yeah, some cities do auction them off.
Because I'd almost be like, if we're taking possession of it, then it's ours now, and we're gonna, if we're paying to have to, I don't want to throw them in the landfill for sure.
Yeah.
That definitely don't want to do that. So I don't know if there's any money to be gained if we were to be able to scrap them, but to counter some of the costs that we're incurring.
I'm sure there's some way.
I don't know. So
Appreciate that. Councilmember Green.
Do you know what we're doing with them right now, like the abandoned ones that the retailers don't want? Does the city already have to go pay to dump them?
I don't know that we're doing anything. So that's not to say that we're not. I just don't know that we are. If we are, we're probably calling the businesses and say, hey, come pick up your
Well,
cards.
in that case, maybe I do know a little bit more on this. So I was told that in cases like Walmart, they might not want the shopping cart back because the plastic on the wheels has been chewed up by the pavement and whatnot. So then it becomes on us to get rid of it. But I don't know how much we're paying to do that or how many times we're doing that. So I was curious about that. I do care more about the abandoned ones. I am curious what other cities might be doing to mitigate, like what does somebody who is carrying all their belongings in a cart use if it's not a shopping cart? I did a quick Google and it said some cities were handing out duffel bags, but I guess my other question would be, do you have a specific city that like threaded the needle, so to say, with the balance between, like I kind of did like the idea of using benchmarking as far as like, do you have 50 carts just sitting at a, in a parking lot, or in the ditch? And using that to be like, well, maybe you should get a geo-blocking system. And I don't know if that would give power to the general managers to tell their corporations, hey, we're going to be fined, or, whatever penalties we're going to face. I do get where a small retailer shouldn't be punished. But I would like to see some way of figuring out how to get them back if they do want them. I mean, the ultimate goal is not to see them in a landfill. Yeah. Assuming they can be used. But anyways, that specific city, did you see one in the mix that kind of hit those marks?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's really hard to say without like probably a good year of enforcement experience behind us to kind of evaluate the
So
success
these were
of
newer
it.
programs?
In some cases, yes. I think Fort Worth, for example, they just passed it a couple months ago, and it's not even in effect yet. But I think, you'd have to kind of get some feedback from the cities, I think. But I think that, maybe that's something that, and I think it really depends. I think, saying you have had so many violations within this period of time, then we have to kind of revisit the issue because clearly something's not working. And I think like a performance-based criteria would be probably the way to thread the needle, because then you're not going to put requirements on like a small business who never has any problems, right? And you're addressing like the businesses who have like the majority of the problem and who are contributing the most with like the number of carts that are being put out there. And I think that's kind of probably how I do it.
And did any of those cities maybe use like a program like A Better Way does in OKC about day labor to fetch some of these? Or the other part of it, I would say too, that I heard about the shopping carts and why they just don't get recycled easily is the labor to take the plastic off of it. Yeah. So that was like another thought, is like maybe some of these programs might be beneficial. I don't know if the scrap metal would help pay for it, but just a thought.
But like a day labor program for the city to kind of
to go grab those carts, or maybe take them apart so that they could be recycled.
I didn't see any, but I did see a couple of cities who did. They licensed specifically cart retrieval programs, right? And so basically, I think in Modesto, California, for example, they had that, and they had something in their code about cart retrieval companies who are used by the retailers and who get a certain dollar fee per cart. That's probably not going to be something we would see because we're probably not facing that much of a problem for it to be profitable. But in terms of what you're thinking about, no, I haven't seen that. But that probably wouldn't be codified. So that's probably something that would be harder to find.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tortorella.
Hey, that was a riveting presentation of carts. How many carts do we have right now that we've identified?
Oh, I don't think we've counted them. I've counted them. Driving home, there are 13 right now in the parking lot.
What's that?
There are 13 right now in the parking lot of the shelter.
I kind of like Councilman Grant's. What did you say about the burlap bags? What was your comment about that? About having bags outside?
Duffel bags
Duffel bags?
distributed by the cities.
So how many, so these shopping carts, are they taken by residents to take their food home because they have no way of getting back to their residence? Or are they taken off the property for other reasons?
I think it's a variety of things. For example, Crest, the feedback I got from them is they have a bus stop right out kind of next to their property. A lot of residents take them to the bus stop, for example. That's not very far, but when I talked to Homeland, some people do take them to their homes because they don't have a mode of transportation, right? And then some people do take them off the property just to carry their own property to and from different places within the city, and that's their form of like transporting their items. It might not be the groceries they bought there. Might just be their own personal items, and they never even shopped there. They just took a cart.
No, I get it. I was doing some research while you were doing your presentation, and there are a lot of cities like Austin and Louisville, and that are putting bins out for people to put their stuff in. So the unhoused, the homeless, instead of carrying their things in a shopping carts, they would have lockers or bins someplace, either on private property or city-owned property. They can actually store their property safely and secured, which has cut down on shopping cart thefts in these big cities here. Have we considered doing that as a solution to a city-wide solution?
I don't think it's necessarily been paired with the concept of like abandoned shopping carts, but we have discussed that possibility in the past. I think there were some concerns about items that would be stored in them and potentially like the upkeep of them, and then like who is assigned to the shopping cart or who's assigned to each individual locker. How do you, like, let's say that person passes away, or likely we wouldn't know about it, but that locker is now locked and there's all these items in there. How do you take care of that because it's on city property? Then you're running into constitutional issues. There are a lot of considerations with that idea as well, but I think a lot of cities have utilized that. I think Food and Shelter has a program like that.
They do. I just talked to April. They have not a lot of lockers, but they do have some lockers. And I would think like the subway top lockers where you would put the key and you take the key out and you'd have that key. The biggest issues that I found so far in these big cities in shopping cart thefts is that this is a convenient way for them to keep all their items in one place and secured. Okay, so if we can help the retailers, and I've spoken to a lot of them too as well, I think the city should look, if we're going to be doing anything in consideration of potential bins or lockers where people can just come or work with the nonprofits, the churches, and co-locate these type of venues on their property. And that way, I think this will help deter theft. Majority of the theft, I'm not sure what the percentage is that these folks are taking the carts off to haul their stuff in. It's anecdotal at this point here, but as a solution, a possible solution, I would like the city to start looking at that as a solution. We shouldn't penalize the business owners and retailers for theft. And I know we have to go out and code enforcement and compliance. They have to go out and they have to pick these carts up because they are blights, and it's out there. Nobody wants to see shopping carts on the sidewalks and the public right-of-ways here. So I think in all the solutions we're discussing today, working with the retailers, working with the nonprofits, I think this should be a discussion to have the city should have of these potential lockers and bins they can store these, their private property. Thank you.
Oh, Councilmember Schuler.
Yeah, I appreciate the, I guess, presentation and the conversation as we try to figure out like how to, as Councilmember Grant said, thread the needle on this, because I think we all understand that it is an issue. I mean, yes, it's a blight, but they can also end up in, our waterways, which is a stormwater kind of issue. And so I don't think that we can just necessarily turn a blind eye to this, but like what I'm not, I guess, interested in doing is, further trying to criminalize homelessness. Like that's what I don't want to do in this scenario. And I appreciate, talking about the businesses, right? Like they are a victim of theft, and I do not want to necessarily penalize them for that, but they are also responsible for securing their own property. So I think that there's a balance between, understanding that they are victims in this process, but also that they have a responsibility on the other side to make sure that this isn't happening. And so I liked, as we kind of continue to formulate what our ordinance might look like, or how we codify this, or how we work with partnerships, I agree focusing on the abandoned carts is a positive way to look at this. That incentivization of the geofencing, or if there's a way that we can incentivize that, or through, I guess, that performance-based criteria, like who is the, biggest culprit of, the shopping carts that we find abandoned, and so having kind of a tiered system, or kind of creating some kind of data around that. I think that the lockers that Councilmember Tortorello suggested, I think is an interesting idea, but I don't know that that's something that's everybody is going to want to feel like they want to do that. Because I know that some people, it is about physically having their things in their possession, like that is the security for them. And while duffel bags or sacks or whatever can be I think a temporary solution, there's nothing like being able to not have something carried on your back, and being able to have a wagon or some other kind of wheeled device that I don't know kind of what that looks like or the cost, but I think that that's not going to cut down on shopping carts forever. So yes, here's your bag for a minute, but I want to move all of my stuff again, then there's another shopping cart in the mix because it's the only solution. So I understand how challenging your job is with this, and kind of trying to like tailor and take all of the pieces that we've talked about. I think it's worth, I guess, exploring what that could look like better, but yeah, by threading this needle of, not penalizing the businesses too much, but also trying to help, especially in the case of Walmart, right, getting corporate to prioritize geofencing or other kind of security measures for their carts. But it also sounds like, based on the conversations and relationships that you've had with those business owners or general managers or whatever, that they want to work towards a solution as well. So I think continuing to broaden those relationships and make sure that in those partnerships that they're, I think, part of the solution, like you said. So I think that I'd like to hear more from kind of what it's like on their end, and like what are they doing, what are the challenges, and how can we help make it easier for them, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything that's been said up here tonight. So definitely don't want to create an undue burden on business. Don't want to make life harder for a population that's already got it hard as it is. I'm really interested in queuing in on the abandoned carts and the geofence idea. And as Councilmember Holman said, I'd be willing to see what the city can do to come alongside that and implement a plan like that, because money spent up front by us is money and labor saved on the back end, hopefully by, eliminating a secondary department or a tow yard, all the things that come along with it. So I think you're on the right track. So I'd just like to see, as Councilmember Schuler said, kind of see the next steps of what this would look like, and kind of just really get something done, because it is a problem. I can't deny that. I get complaints about this all the time, and Heck, I had a shopping cart show up on my street last night. I have no idea where it came from. It just came out of nowhere. So we've got to do something. I'm just not sure what it is yet. So appreciate this. If there's no other thoughts, I believe this meeting is adjourned.